In the stillness of the early morning, as the sun began to peek over the mountains, a lone figure stood on a grassy hill. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the scent of earth and the distant sound of rushing water. This was not just any man, this was a warrior, and his heart beat with the rhythm of a tradition that had been passed down through generations. In his soul, he carried the weight of honor, the fire of discipline, and the unbreakable will of a warrior. This was the spirit that shaped the very foundation of Japan's warrior culture. Long before the rise of mighty samurai or the shadowy figures of ninja, there was a land in need of protection, a people in need of defenders. In these ancient times, life was not easy. Villages were vulnerable to threats from both within and beyond their borders. The need for strength, for guardians who would stand between their loved ones and the dangers of the world, was a powerful force that molded the identity of those early warriors. The roots of Japan's warrior ethos are buried deep in this need for protection and survival. But they did not grow in isolation. Across the sea, powerful influences were at play, shaping the minds and hearts of those who would become Japan's first defenders. From the ancient lands of China and Korea, knowledge and practices flowed into Japan like a river, bringing with them the seeds of martial traditions that would take root in the fertile soil of Japanese culture. These early warriors learned much from their neighbors. From China, they absorbed the principles of discipline and strategy. The teachings of Sun Tzu, with his wisdom on the art of war, resonated deeply with them. They understood that to win a battle, one must first win the heart and mind. They learned the importance of patience, of knowing when to strike and when to hold back. They trained their bodies to be strong, their minds to be sharp, and their spirits to be unyielding. Korea, too, left its mark on these early warriors. The Korean peninsula, with its own history of conflict and warfare, was a source of inspiration. The Koreans taught them the value of unity, of standing together as one in the face of adversity. They learned the power of community, the strength that comes from fighting not just for oneself, but for the safety and honor of one's people. These lessons were not just about battle, they were about life, about the connections that bind people together and the responsibilities that come with those bonds. As these influences melded with the native spirit of Japan, a new class began to emerge. These were the Bushi, the warrior class that would come to define Japan's feudal era. The Bushi were more than just fighters, they were the embodiment of the ideals that had been passed down through generations. They were bound by a code of honor, a set of principles that guided their every action. Loyalty, courage, and respect were not just words to them, they were the very essence of their being. The Bushi saw themselves as the protectors of the land, the guardians of their lords and the people. They lived by the sword, but they also lived by a deep sense of duty. Every day, they trained their bodies and their minds, honing their skills so that they might be ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. But it was not just physical strength that made them powerful, it was their unwavering commitment to their code, to the principles that had been instilled in them since they first took up the sword. The Bushi understood that their role in society was not just to fight, but to lead by example. They were the standard bearers of honor and integrity, the ones who others looked up to in times of crisis. Their presence brought comfort to those they protected, and fear to those who threatened them. In the quiet moments, when the world was at peace, they were still vigilant, always prepared for the day when they would be called upon to defend what they held dear. In this way, the Bushi became more than just warriors, they became the heart of a society that valued strength and honor above all else. Their influence reached far beyond the battlefield, shaping the culture and values of Japan for centuries to come. Their legacy can still be felt today, in the way that the Japanese people honor their ancestors and the respect they show for tradition and discipline. As the sun set on that grassy hill, the warrior looked out over the land he had sworn to protect. His heart was filled with a sense of purpose, a knowledge that he was part of something greater than himself. The path he walked was not an easy one, but it was a path that had been walked by countless others before him, and would be walked by many more after him. He was a Bushi, a warrior of Japan, and in his hands, he held the power to shape the future. The wind continued to blow, carrying with it the echoes of the past, the voices of those who had come before. In those whispers, the warrior heard the stories of his ancestors, the tales of their bravery and their sacrifices. He knew that he was not alone, that he was part of a tradition that stretched back through the ages, a tradition that had been forged in the fires of conflict and tempered by the strength of the human spirit. And as he stood there, with the weight of that tradition on his shoulders, he felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that he was exactly where he was meant to be. In the midst of a quiet dawn, a lone figure stood in a courtyard, his sword held steady, its blade reflecting the first light of the day. Every breath he took was deliberate, every movement a testament to years of discipline. This was not just a weapon in his hand, it was an extension of his soul, a symbol of his commitment to a way of life that demanded everything he had to give. This was the life of a samurai, and in his heart burned the code that defined his existence. The samurai did not rise to power overnight. They were forged through centuries of conflict, born from the chaos of a land divided by warlords and rival clans. As Japan splintered into feudal domains, the need for skilled warriors became more pressing. These warriors were more than just soldiers, they were the embodiment of loyalty, discipline, and honor. As the flames of war spread across the land, the samurai emerged as the dominant force, shaping the very course of Japanese history. In the heart of every samurai was Bushido, the way of the warrior. This was not just a code, it was a way of life, a set of principles that guided every decision, every action. Bushido was not about glory or fame, it was about duty and sacrifice. It was about living each day as if it were your last, knowing that at any moment, you might be called to lay down your life in service to your Lord. For the samurai, this was not a burden, but an honor. Their lives were dedicated to something greater than themselves, and in that dedication, they found their purpose. Loyalty was the cornerstone of Bushido. A samurai's loyalty to his lord was absolute, unwavering, and unbreakable. He would follow his lord into the depths of battle, face any enemy, endure any hardship, all for the sake of his duty. To betray that loyalty was the greatest dishonor, a stain that could never be washed away. This loyalty was not born out of fear or obligation, but out of a deep sense of respect and commitment. It was the bond that held the samurai together, the foundation upon which their society was built. Courage was another pillar of Bushido. But this was not the reckless bravery of a fool rushing into danger. It was a quiet, steadfast courage, the kind that allowed a samurai to stand firm in the face of overwhelming odds, to confront fear and overcome it. Courage was not just about facing death on the battlefield, it was about living with honor in every aspect of life. It was about making the difficult choices, even when those choices came at great personal cost. It was about standing up for what was right, no matter the consequences. Respect was also central to Bushido. A samurai treated others with the same respect he expected to receive, whether they were his peers, his superiors, or those beneath him. This respect was born out of humility, the understanding that every person has value, that every life is precious. It was this respect that guided the samurai's interactions with others, that tempered his strength with compassion, his power with mercy. Honesty and integrity were also at the heart of Bushido. A samurai's word was his bond, his actions a reflection of his inner character. Deceit and dishonesty were abhorrent to the samurai, who valued truth above all else. This commitment to honesty was not just about telling the truth, it was about living it, about being true to oneself and to one's values. It was about doing the right thing, even when no one was watching, even when it was difficult or inconvenient. Duty and responsibility were the final pillars of Bushido. A samurai was always mindful of his responsibilities, always aware of the impact of his actions on others. He did not act out of selfishness or for personal gain, he acted out of a sense of duty to his lord, his family, his community. This sense of duty extended beyond the battlefield, permeating every aspect of a samurai's life. Whether he was tending to his land, raising his children, or serving his lord, a samurai was always guided by his sense of duty, by his commitment to do what was right. In Japanese feudal society, the samurai were not just warriors, they were the backbone of the entire social structure. They served as the enforcers of law and order, the protectors of their lord's domains, and the leaders of their communities. They were respected and revered, their presence a symbol of stability and strength. But with this respect came great responsibility. The samurai were expected to live by the highest standards, to serve as role models for others, to uphold the values of Bushido in every aspect of their lives. As time went on, the role of the samurai evolved. They became more than just warriors, they became scholars, poets, and artists. They mastered the arts of calligraphy, tea ceremony, and flower arranging, blending their martial prowess with a deep appreciation for beauty and culture. This balance between strength and grace, between power and refinement, was the hallmark of the samurai way of life. Yet, despite their elevated status, the samurai never forgot their origins, never lost sight of the principles that had brought them to power. They remained humble, always mindful of their responsibilities, always aware that their power came not from their swords, but from their commitment to Bushido. And so, they lived their lives with honor, with dignity, and with a deep sense of purpose, knowing that they were part of something much larger than themselves, something timeless and unbreakable. In the quiet moments, when the battles were over and the world was still, the samurai would reflect on their lives, on the choices they had made, on the code they had followed. They knew that they had chosen a difficult path, one filled with challenges and sacrifices. But they also knew that they had lived their lives with honor, that they had stayed true to their principles, that they had upheld the legacy of Bushido. And in that knowledge, they found peace, knowing that they had fulfilled their duty, that they had lived and died as true samurai. Under the pale light of the moon, the battlefield lay quiet, a sea of grass swaying gently in the night breeze. But the silence was heavy, filled with the echoes of warriors who had fought and bled on this sacred ground. Among them were the samurai, figures who stood tall not just in body, but in spirit. Their stories would be told for centuries, their names whispered with a mixture of reverence and awe. These were not just warriors, they were legends, and their deeds would shape the course of Japanese history. One such name was Minamoto no Yoshitsune, a man whose brilliance on the battlefield was matched only by the tragedy of his life. Yoshitsune was a figure who inspired both fear and admiration. His tactics were unconventional, his strategies bold and unpredictable. In the famous Battle of Dan-no-Ura, he led the Minamoto forces to a decisive victory over the Terra clan, a turning point that would end the Genpei War. But his victories were not just about skill, they were about heart, about the courage to face overwhelming odds and emerge victorious. Yet, despite his successes, Yoshitsune's life was marked by betrayal, hunted by his own brother until the bitter end. His story is one of triumph and sorrow, a reminder that even the greatest heroes are not immune to the tragedies of life. Another figure etched in the annals of history is Oda Nobunaga, a man who rose from obscurity to become one of Japan's most powerful warlords. Nobunaga was a force of nature, a man who refused to be bound by tradition or convention. He was ruthless, but his ruthlessness was driven by a vision of a unified Japan, free from the constant warring of rival clans. The Battle of Okahazama is where his legend truly began, where he defeated a much larger army with cunning and audacity. Nobunaga's rise to power was swift and unstoppable, but it was his relentless drive for unity that set him apart. He laid the foundations for what would become the Tokugawa shogunate, changing the course of Japanese history forever. Yet, his life, too, ended in betrayal, surrounded by flames in the Hanoji Temple, a fittingly dramatic end for a man who lived by the sword. Then there was Toyotomi Hideyoshi, a man of humble origins who clawed his way to the pinnacle of power. Hideyoshi was not born a samurai, but his ambition and brilliance carried him far beyond his humble beginnings. He was a master of diplomacy as much as he was of war, and his conquest of Japan was as much a feat of negotiation as it was of battle. The Siege of Odawara is one of his most famous campaigns, where his combination of military might and psychological warfare brought even the most stubborn of enemies to their knees. But Hideyoshi's legacy was not just one of conquest, it was one of unity and peace. He is remembered not just as a warrior, but as a ruler, a man who brought a fractured nation together under one banner. In the wake of these legends came Tokugawa Ieyasu, the man who would finally achieve the vision of a united Japan. Ieyasu was patient where others were rash, cautious where others were bold. His victory at the Battle of Sekigahara was the culmination of decades of careful planning, a masterstroke that would establish the Tokugawa shogunate and bring peace to Japan for over 2 centuries. Ieyasu was not the fiery warrior of his predecessors, he was a strategist, a man who understood the long game. His reign marked the end of the Sengoku period, a time of near-constant warfare, and the beginning of the Edo period, a time of peace and stability. But even in this time of peace, the spirit of the samurai lived on, their influence shaping the culture and society of Japan. As the years passed, the role of the samurai began to change. No longer were they needed solely on the battlefield, their skills and principles found new expression in the courts of the shogunate. Samurai who once led armies now served as administrators and advisors, their swords more often sheathed than drawn. But even in this new role, they remained true to the principles of Bushido. Their honor was now expressed in governance, their loyalty in service to the shogun and the people. They were the glue that held society together, the guardians of the peace they had fought so hard to achieve. The evolution from battlefield to court did not diminish the samurai's importance, it only deepened it. Their influence extended beyond warfare into the very fabric of Japanese culture. They became patrons of the arts, protectors of culture, and upholders of the law. The sword, once a tool of war, became a symbol of justice, a reminder of the samurai's duty to protect the weak and uphold the law. And even as the need for war diminished, the samurai continued to train, to prepare, knowing that their peace was fragile, that their duty was never truly done. The stories of these legendary samurai are not just tales of battle, they are tales of honor, of sacrifice, and of a relentless pursuit of something greater than oneself. They remind us that true strength is not just in the sword, but in the heart that wields it. They remind us that greatness is not just in victory, but in the way we live our lives, and the principles we uphold, even when the world changes around us. And so, under the moonlit sky, the spirits of these warriors continue to whisper their stories to those who will listen. Their names live on, not just in the pages of history, but in the hearts of those who honor their legacy. The battlefield may have changed, but the spirit of the samurai remains eternal, a beacon of honor and courage for all who follow in their footsteps. The blade sliced through the air, its edge gleaming in the faint light, a whisper of death in the hands of a master. The katana, more than just a weapon, was the soul of the samurai. Every curve of its razor-sharp edge, every inch of its polished steel, spoke of a commitment to perfection, to the art of war that was the samurai's life. To wield a katana was to hold in your hands the culmination of centuries of tradition, a tool crafted with such care and precision that it became an extension of the warrior's spirit. But the katana was more than just a sword. It was a symbol of the samurai's unwavering discipline, their relentless pursuit of mastery. Forged in the fires of a blacksmith's forge, the katana was born from the raw elements of the earth, shaped and tempered through countless hours of painstaking labor. Every stroke of the hammer, every plunge into the cooling water, was an act of devotion, a testament to the bond between the craftsman and the warrior who would one day wield it. The katana was not the only weapon in the samurai's arsenal. Alongside it was the wakizashi, a shorter blade that complemented the katana, together forming the daisho, the long and short pair that every samurai carried. While the katana was the sword of battle, the wakizashi was often used in close quarters or in the ritual of seppuku, a final act of honor that allowed a samurai to maintain their dignity even in defeat. The bond between these two blades was unbreakable, as inseparable as the samurai's sense of duty and honor. The yumi, the longbow, was another weapon that defined the samurai's skill. Before the rise of the katana, the yumi was the primary weapon on the battlefield. Its reach was unmatched, its power deadly, able to strike down enemies from a distance with precision. In the hands of a skilled samurai, the yumi was not just a bow, it was a lifeline, a tool that allowed them to protect their land and their lord from afar. Archery was not just a skill, it was an art, practiced with a reverence that bordered on the spiritual. The samurai would train for years, honing their ability to strike with unerring accuracy, to send an arrow flying true with nothing more than the strength of their arm and the focus of their mind. But the samurai's prowess did not end with weapons alone. They were masters of various martial arts, techniques that turned their bodies into weapons as deadly as any blade. Jiu-jitsu, the art of grappling, allowed them to subdue their opponents without the need for a sword. With a series of fluid, precise movements, a samurai could disarm, disable, or even kill, all while maintaining control and balance. Jiu-jitsu was about using an opponent's strength against them, about turning the tide of battle with nothing more than skill and technique. Kenjutsu, the art of the sword, was where the samurai truly excelled. It was not enough to simply wield a sword. A samurai had to become one with their weapon, to understand every nuance of its weight and balance. Kenjutsu was about precision, about striking with speed and accuracy, about knowing when to attack and when to defend. It was a dance of death, a series of movements so practiced and refined that they became second nature. A samurai in the midst of Kenjutsu was a sight to behold, a blur of motion and steel, every strike a testament to years of training and discipline. Yet, it was not just physical skill that made the samurais such formidable warriors. Their strength lay as much in their minds as in their bodies. Strategy and tactics were the backbone of samurai warfare, the guiding principles that turned a group of warriors into an unstoppable force. A samurai did not rush into battle blindly. Every move was calculated, every decision weighed carefully. They studied the terrain, understood their enemies' weaknesses, and devised plans that would give them the upper hand. One of the most revered strategies was the use of the terrain to the samurai's advantage. They would position themselves in a way that maximized their strengths and minimized their vulnerabilities. A battle fought on a mountain pass, where the enemy could only approach in single file, was a battle already half won. The samurai understood that the battlefield was not just a place of combat, but a tool that could be used to outmaneuver and outsmart the enemy. Deception also played a crucial role in samurai tactics. The art of feigned retreats, ambushes, and surprise attacks were all part of their arsenal. A samurai might appear to flee in terror, only to lead their pursuers into a carefully laid trap. This ability to mislead and manipulate was a mark of true mastery, a reflection of the samurai's understanding that war was as much about the mind as it was about the sword. Even in the midst of battle, the samurai's focus never wavered. They fought with a clarity of purpose, a single-minded determination that drove them forward even in the face of overwhelming odds. They knew that victory was not just about defeating the enemy, it was about maintaining their honor, about upholding the values of Bushido. To falter, to show fear or hesitation, was to fail not just themselves, but the very code they had sworn to uphold. And so, the samurai fought with every ounce of their being, their weapons an extension of their will, their techniques honed to perfection through years of relentless training. Every battle was a test of their skills, a chance to prove themselves worthy of the title they bore. In the heat of combat, with the clash of steel and the cries of the wounded all around them, the samurai remained calm, their minds as sharp as their blades, their hearts as steadfast as the mountains. The katana, the yumi, the wakizashi, these were more than just tools of war. They were symbols of a way of life, of a commitment to excellence that defined the samurai in every aspect of their lives. Through these weapons and techniques, the samurai left an indelible mark on the history of Japan, a legacy of honor, discipline, and mastery that would endure long after the last battle had been fought. Under the cover of darkness, where the moon's light barely kissed the earth, they moved like whispers in the wind, silent, unseen, unstoppable. The world knew them as ninja, but to those who truly understood, they were more than mere shadows. They were the embodiment of patience, precision, and the power of the unknown. In a time of chaos and war, when the land of Japan was torn apart by warring clans, the ninja emerged from the mist, changing the very nature of warfare. The roots of the ninja can be traced back to the Sengoku period, a time when Japan was fractured, with warlords battling for power and territory. In this era of constant strife, brute strength alone wasn't enough to secure victory. The battlefield extended beyond swords and spears. It reached into the shadows, where information was as valuable as an army, and silence was deadlier than the sharpest blade. It was in these shadows that the ninja thrived, trained in the arts of stealth, espionage, and sabotage. The origins of the ninja are shrouded in mystery, much like the warriors themselves. Born in the mountainous regions of Iga and Koga, they were ordinary people who had mastered extraordinary skills. Farmers, villagers, monks, anyone could be a ninja. What set them apart was not their birthright, but their training and dedication to a life lived in the shadows. From a young age, they were taught to move silently, to blend into their surroundings, and to strike with precision when the moment was right. Their rise was inevitable in a time when traditional warfare left gaps that only those with cunning and stealth could fill. The ninja were not samurai. They did not fight for honor or glory. They fought for survival, for the protection of their clans, and for the promise of a future where they could live in peace. This made them unpredictable, unbound by the codes that restricted the samurai. In the chaos of the Sengoku period, their skills became invaluable, and they were sought after by warlords who understood that victory often hinged on what was done in the dark, away from the eyes of the enemy. The myths surrounding the ninja are as numerous as the stars, tales of warriors who could vanish into thin air, who walked on water, who were invincible in the face of danger. These stories were fueled by the ninjas' ability to create fear and confusion among their enemies. While they could not perform miracles, their techniques made them seem otherworldly. They used disguises, moving through enemy ranks undetected, gathering intelligence, sowing discord, and striking when least expected. Their weapons were as varied as their skills. They carried the kunai, a simple tool that could be used as a knife or a throwing weapon. The shuriken, small, star-shaped blades, could be thrown with deadly accuracy, their small size belying the damage they could inflict. But more important than their weapons was their knowledge of human nature, their understanding of how to manipulate fear and anticipation. They knew that the greatest weapon was the mind, and they used it to devastating effect. Despite the legends, the reality of the ninja was both more humble and more impressive. They were not superhuman. They were people who had honed their craft to perfection. Their training was grueling, their lives dedicated to their art. They studied the terrain, learned the habits of their enemies, and practiced the art of patience. They knew when to strike and, perhaps more importantly, when to wait. The ninja were masters of timing, and it was this mastery that made them so effective in the chaos of the Sengoku period. Among the ninja, certain clans rose to prominence, their names becoming synonymous with the shadowy warriors of legend. The Iga and Koga clans were the most famous, their members trained from birth in the ways of the ninja. These clans were not just families, they were communities bound by a shared purpose and a shared secret. They developed their own techniques, their own codes, and their own way of life, passed down from generation to generation. The Iga clan, nestled in the remote mountains, became known for their impenetrable strongholds and their unmatched stealth. The Koga clan, on the other hand, was famous for their expertise in guerrilla warfare and their deep knowledge of the land. Together, these clans formed a network that could gather intelligence, sabotage enemy plans, and eliminate threats before they even materialized. Their contributions to Japanese warfare were immeasurable, not because of the battles they won, but because of the battles they prevented, the wars they ended before they began. But with the end of the Sengoku period and the unification of Japan under the Tokugawa shogunate, the need for ninja began to fade. The peace that followed was both a blessing and a curse. The skills of the ninja, honed in the fires of war, were no longer in demand. Many ninja returned to their lives as farmers, monks, and villagers, their skills and secrets fading into the background. The legends remained, however, growing in the telling, until the line between fact and fiction blurred beyond recognition. Yet, the true legacy of the ninja is not in the stories of superhuman feats or invisible warriors. It is in the lessons they taught about the power of strategy, the importance of intelligence, and the value of patience. The ninja understood that sometimes the greatest victories are won not on the battlefield, but in the shadows, where the world is quiet, and the only sound is the whisper of the wind. They taught that strength is not just in the sword, but in the mind, in the ability to adapt, to survive, and to thrive even in the most difficult circumstances. In the end, the ninja were not just warriors of the shadows, they were warriors of the heart, driven by a love for their families, their clans, and their land. Their story is one of resilience, of courage in the face of overwhelming odds, and of a commitment to a way of life that valued cunning over strength, intelligence over brute force. There were the shadows that shaped the light, the unseen hands that guided the fate of Japan in its darkest hours. In the quiet of night, where shadows stretched long and the world held its breath, the ninja prepared. Their fingers traced the contours of tools that were as much a part of them as their own limbs, simple, yet deadly instruments crafted for precision, stealth, and survival. The weapons they carried were not merely objects of destruction, but extensions of their will, honed to perfection through years of relentless training. The ninja moved with the grace of a shadow, their hearts steady, their minds sharp, knowing that in the next moment, everything could change. The tools of the ninja were as varied as the tasks they undertook, each designed with a singular purpose, to give them an edge in a world where they could not afford to fail. The shuriken, small and deadly, could be thrown with pinpoint accuracy, slicing through the air with a whisper before finding its mark. The kunai, simple in appearance, was a versatile tool, serving as a knife, a spearhead, or even a grappling hook. These were not the grand weapons of the battlefield, but the quiet assassins of the night, designed to strike fear into the hearts of those who never saw them coming. But perhaps the most iconic of all was the katana, the soul of the ninja, as much a symbol as it was a weapon. Unlike the ornate swords of the samurai, the ninja's katana was a tool of efficiency, shorter, and more suited to the close-quarters combat they often found themselves in. It was not just a blade, but a part of them, an extension of their spirit, forged in the fires of discipline and tempered by the knowledge that one misstep could mean death. Beyond their weapons, the ninja's arsenal included gadgets that bordered on the ingenious. Smoke bombs, simple in construction, could fill a room with choking fog, giving the ninja the cover they needed to escape or strike. The makibishi, small, spiked caltrops, could be scattered on the ground to slow down pursuers, their sharp points ready to pierce through sandals or bare feet. These tools, like the ninja themselves, were deceptively simple, designed to exploit the weaknesses of their enemies and turn the tide of battle in their favor. But it was not just the weapons that made the ninja formidable. It was their training, their discipline, and their unparalleled mastery of stealth. From a young age, the ninja were taught to move silently, to become one with the darkness, to blend into the background until they were nothing more than a shadow, unnoticed and unremarkable. They practiced the art of walking on tiptoe, placing their feet with such care that not even a leaf would rustle beneath them. Their training was relentless, pushing them to the limits of endurance, so that when the time came, they could endure anything the world threw at them. Stealth was their greatest weapon, the ability to move through the world unnoticed, to see without being seen, to strike without warning. The ninja mastered the art of disguise, becoming whoever they needed to be, a monk, a merchant, a farmer, blending into their surroundings with such ease that even their enemies could not tell them apart. They learned to use the environment to their advantage, using the shadows, the trees, the rivers, to cover their movements, to hide their presence until it was too late. But with all their skill and training, the ninja lived by a code, a set of principles that guided their actions and kept them true to their path. They were not mindless killers, they were warriors with a purpose, fighting not for glory or power, but for the survival of their clans, for the protection of their people. Their code of conduct was one of discipline, of loyalty, of knowing when to strike and when to hold back. They understood that true power was not in the blade, but in the mind, and the ability to outthink and outmaneuver their enemies. The mystique of the ninja, however, did not end with their deeds on the battlefield. Their presence seeped into the very fabric of Japanese folklore, their legends growing with each retelling until they became larger than life. They were the specters that haunted the dreams of those who feared the night, the unseen force that could change the course of history with a single strike. Stories of their exploits became the stuff of legend, tales of warriors who could vanish into thin air, who could walk on water, who could kill with a glance. These stories, while exaggerated, held a kernel of truth. The ninja's ability to manipulate perception, to create an aura of invincibility, was as much a part of their arsenal as their weapons and gadgets. They understood that fear could be as powerful as a sword, that the mind could be a battlefield where victory was won before the first blow was struck. The ninja became more than just warriors, they became myths, symbols of a time when the world was a darker, more dangerous place. In popular culture, the image of the ninja has persisted, evolving with each generation, yet always retaining that air of mystery and danger. They have become icons, representing the ultimate in stealth and discipline in the art of war. From movies to books to video games, the ninja has been reimagined and reinterpreted countless times, yet the core of what makes them so compelling remains the same: their ability to move through the world unseen, to strike without warning, and to leave behind nothing but the echoes of their presence. The tools and techniques of the ninja may have been simple, but they were wielded with such skill and precision that they became legendary. The ninja themselves, with their unparalleled training and their unyielding code of conduct, became the stuff of legends. And in the end, it is not the weapons they used or the battles they fought that define them, but the way they lived, in the shadows, with a quiet strength that still resonates through the ages. In the misty mountains of ancient Japan, where temples stood tall against the sky and the echoes of chanting monks filled the air, a different kind of warrior was born. These were the Sōhei, the war monks, men who lived between the sacred and the battlefield, where faith and steel met in the most extraordinary way. They were not mere soldiers, nor were they simply monks. They were something far more powerful. The fire of their faith drove them, and the sword was their tool, not just to defend themselves, but to protect what they held most dear. The origins of the war monks began with Buddhism's deep roots in Japan, spreading peace and compassion through its teachings. But in a land where power was often taken by force, even the most peaceful had to learn to defend themselves. The rise of the Sōhei was a response to the turbulent times when temples were not just places of worship but centers of power and influence. These monks took up arms, not out of a desire for violence, but because the world around them left them no choice. They were trained as warriors, yet their hearts remained devoted to the teachings of the Buddha. Their faith was not a contradiction to their skill with the sword, it was their strength. For the Sōhei, every strike of the blade was a prayer, every battle a test of their spiritual resolve. They fought not for glory or riches, but to protect their temples, their beliefs, and their way of life. This was a path of sacrifice, where the line between the sacred and the profane was as thin as the edge of a blade. In the midst of chaos, the Sōhei stood tall, their robes flowing as they charged into battle, their heads shaved in devotion, their eyes burning with the intensity of their purpose. They were feared not just for their skill in combat, but for their unbreakable spirit. It was said that a war monk could face 1,000 enemies and not flinch, for he knew that death in battle was not the end, but a passage to something greater. This belief made them formidable foes, for they fought with a calmness that unnerved even the most hardened warriors. Buddhism was more than just a religion to the Sōhei, it was the very foundation of their existence. The teachings of the Buddha shaped their lives, their thoughts, and their actions. They followed a strict code of discipline, meditating for hours, chanting prayers, and training their bodies to endure the hardships of war. Their temples were not just places of worship, but fortresses where they prepared for the battles that were as much spiritual as they were physical. Key battles involving the Sōhei were turning points in Japanese history, moments where faith clashed with ambition, and where the fate of temples hung in the balance. One such battle was the siege of Mount Hai, a sacred mountain home to thousands of monks. Here, the Sōhei defended their temple against a powerful warlord who sought to destroy them. The war monks fought with a desperation born of faith, holding off the invaders with everything they had. The air was thick with the smell of incense and blood, and the chanting of the monks could be heard even in the midst of battle. Though many of the Sōhei fell, their sacrifice became a symbol of unwavering devotion, and the mountain remained a beacon of Buddhist faith. Another significant conflict was the Battle of Uji, where the Sōhei played a crucial role in defending their temple from a rival faction. As the river swelled with the bodies of the fallen, the war monks fought on, their spirits unbroken, their resolve unshaken. Their leader, a monk of great wisdom and strength, stood at the forefront, his sword gleaming in the sunlight, cutting through the enemy with the precision of a master. The battle was fierce, and many lives were lost, but the temple was saved, and the Sōhei's reputation as warriors of faith was solidified. The Sōhei were not just defenders of their temples, they were defenders of an entire way of life. They fought for more than just the survival of their beliefs, they fought for the soul of Japan. Their presence on the battlefield was a reminder that even in the darkest times, there were those who stood for something greater than themselves. They were the embodiment of the warrior spirit, tempered by faith, driven by a higher purpose. Their legacy is one of courage, sacrifice, and an unyielding commitment to their beliefs. The Sōhei were more than just warriors, they were symbols of the power of faith in the face of overwhelming odds. They stood where others would fall, they fought where others would flee, and they lived their lives with a dedication that continues to inspire. The war monks of Japan may have walked the path of warriors, but their true strength lay in their hearts, where the teachings of the Buddha burned brightly, guiding their every move, every strike, every breath. They were warriors of faith, and their story is one of the most profound and moving chapters in the history of Japan. The ground beneath their feet was not just earth, it was history, soaked in the blood and sweat of countless warriors who had fought for their lives, their honor, and their beliefs. The battlefields of Japan are more than just places where conflicts were decided, they are sacred lands where the echoes of clashing swords and battle cries still linger, where every stone and blade of grass whispers stories of courage and sacrifice. These battlefields were the stages upon which Japan's warrior classes, samurai, ninja, and Sōhei, proved their mettle, shaped the destiny of a nation, and etched their names into eternity. The Battle of Sekigahara stands as a monumental clash that changed the course of Japan's history. It was here, on a foggy morning, that the fate of an entire country hung in the balance. The air was thick with tension, the sound of armor clinking and soldiers murmuring prayers to their ancestors. Over 160,000 warriors converged on this field, each side determined to claim victory. The Tokugawa forces, under the banner of Ieyasu, met their enemies in a confrontation that would mark the beginning of a new era. The battle was fierce, with swords flashing and arrows flying, the ground trembling under the weight of the conflict. The terrain played a crucial role, with the mountains and rivers shaping the strategies that would ultimately decide the outcome. As the sun set, the cries of the fallen filled the air, but the Tokugawa had emerged victorious, paving the way for the shogunate that would rule Japan for over 2 centuries. In the north, the siege of Osaka saw another pivotal moment in Japan's military history. Osaka Castle, a towering fortress of stone and iron, was the last bastion of resistance against the Tokugawa shogunate. It was not just a battle for control, it was a battle for survival. The castle, surrounded by moats and walls as thick as a man's height, seemed impenetrable. Yet, the Tokugawa forces were relentless. They laid siege to the castle, cutting off supplies and bombarding it with cannon fire. The defenders, loyal to the Toyotomi clan, fought with a desperation born of knowing this was their last stand. The nights were filled with the glow of fires, and the days echoed with the sounds of battle. Despite their bravery, the defenders could not hold out forever. The castle walls finally crumbled, and with them, the last hopes of resisting the Tokugawa. The siege was not just the end of a clan, it was the end of an era, marking the complete unification of Japan under Tokugawa rule. The rugged terrain of Japan was as much a player in these battles as the warriors themselves. The mountains, rivers, and forests were more than just obstacles, they were allies and enemies, shaping strategies, aiding ambushes, and hiding secrets. The Battle of Kawanakajima, fought between the forces of Takeda Shinjin and Usuji Kenshin, is a perfect example of how the land itself could determine the flow of battle. The river that cut through the battlefield became a line of life and death, with each side trying to outmaneuver the other across its banks. The dense forests provided cover for ambushes, while the steep mountains forced the armies into narrow passes where they could be easily trapped. The battle raged on for years, with neither side able to claim a decisive victory, each clash a brutal reminder of the unforgiving nature of both the land and war. But the battlefields were not just open fields and mountain passes, Japan's castles and fortresses were battlegrounds in their own right. Himeji Castle, often called the White Heron because of its elegant design, was more than just a beautiful structure, it was a symbol of power and a key defensive stronghold. Perched on a hilltop, its walls seemed to rise straight out of the earth, blending with the rocky terrain. Its multiple layers of defense, including hidden doors, maze-like corridors, and steep stone walls, made it nearly impregnable. It stood as a testament to the strategic brilliance of its builders and the military might of its defenders. Similarly, the castles of Matsumoto and Kumamoto played vital roles in their regions, serving as both military headquarters and symbols of authority. Matsumoto Castle, with its striking black walls, known as the Crow Castle, stood as a guardian over the plains, its reflection shimmering in the moat that surrounded it. Kumamoto Castle, with its massive stone foundations and towering keep, was a fortress designed to withstand the fiercest of attacks. These castles were not just buildings, they were fortresses of hope and despair, where warriors defended their honor and their lives. The battlefields of Japan, whether open plains, rugged mountains, or towering castles, were the crucibles in which the nation's history was forged. Every conflict, every siege, every clash of swords and wills left its mark on the land and the people who fought there. The warriors who stood on these fields were not just fighting for themselves, they were fighting for their clans, their beliefs, and the future of Japan itself. The blood that was spilled on these battlefields became part of the very soil, nurturing the stories of heroism, betrayal, and sacrifice that continue to resonate through the ages. These lands, once scarred by war, now stand as silent witnesses to the courage and determination of those who shaped Japan's destiny with their own hands. The warrior's sword, once the soul of Japan, began to gather dust as the flames of change swept across the land. The warriors who had once been the heartbeat of the nation, samurai, ninja, and war monks, found themselves standing on the precipice of a new world, one that no longer needed them in the way it once had. The Edo period, which brought peace to a war-weary nation, also heralded the slow decline of these once mighty figures. The samurai, who had lived by a strict code of honor and duty, were the first to feel the weight of this new era. With the unification of Japan under the Tokugawa shogunate, the need for constant warfare diminished. Samurai, who had once been the fierce protectors of their lords and lands, were now reduced to bureaucrats, their swords more decorative than deadly. The very essence of their existence, Bushido, the way of the warrior, began to lose its meaning in a society that no longer required their service on the battlefield. Many samurai struggled with this new reality, their hands once used to gripping swords now grasping at scrolls, their hearts heavy with the burden of irrelevance. The ninja, too, found themselves fading into the shadows they once commanded. The age of espionage and secret warfare had passed, leaving little room for the covert operations that had defined their lives. The Warring States period, which had been the peak of their influence, was now a distant memory. The skills that had made them legends, stealth, sabotage, and the art of deception, were no longer in demand in a country striving for peace and stability. The ninja, who had thrived in chaos, found themselves without purpose in a world that no longer required their particular brand of expertise. Their secrets, once passed down through generations, began to fade as their way of life became obsolete. The war monks, the Sōhei, who had once wielded both sword and scripture with equal fervor, also felt the sting of this new era. The temples that had once been fortresses of faith and power were now seen as relics of a bygone time. The Edo period brought with it a centralization of power that left little room for the religious orders that had once played a significant role in Japan's military and political spheres. The Sōhei, who had fought bravely in the name of their beliefs, were now seen as unnecessary in a society that sought to distance itself from the violent conflicts of the past. Their temples became places of peace rather than war, and the monks who had once been warriors were now simply men of faith. The Meiji Restoration dealt the final blow to the warrior classes of Japan. As the nation opened its doors to the West and embraced modernization, the old ways were cast aside in favor of new, more efficient methods. The samurai, who had once been the pillars of Japanese society, were stripped of their privileges and titles. Their swords, the symbols of their status and honor, were outlawed in public. The samurai who had once walked with pride and purpose now found themselves adrift in a world that no longer revered their way of life. The ninja, already on the brink of extinction, disappeared into legend, their stories passed down as folklore rather than history. The Sōhei, too, were forced to adapt or fade away as the government sought to secularize and modernize Japan. The temples that had once been centers of power were now simply places of worship, their influence diminished in a society that was rapidly changing. The transition from feudal warfare to modern military practices was not just a change in tactics, it was a shift in the very soul of Japan. The warrior classes, who had once defined the nation, were now relics of a past that the new Japan sought to move beyond. The introduction of conscription and the creation of a modern, Western-style army signaled the end of an era. The battles that had once been fought with honor and tradition were now replaced with the cold, calculated strategies of modern warfare. But the spirit of the warrior did not disappear completely. It was transformed, adapted to the new realities of the world. The values of Bushido, the discipline of the ninja, and the faith of the Sōhei were not lost, they were absorbed into the new identity of Japan. The warrior classes may have declined, but their legacy lived on in the hearts and minds of the people. The sword was no longer the soul of the samurai, but the soul of Japan remained, forged in the fires of its warrior past. As the old gave way to the new, the memories of those who had once stood at the forefront of Japan's history were etched into the very fabric of the nation. The samurai, ninja, and war monks may have faded from the physical world, but their spirits continued to inspire, to remind the people of Japan of the strength, honor, and resilience that had once defined them. The decline of the warrior classes was not just an end, it was the beginning of a new chapter in Japan's story, one that would carry the essence of the past into the future. In the quiet of a dojo, the echo of a sword striking air speaks to something far greater than a simple practice of martial arts. It is the whisper of centuries, the pulse of a culture that was shaped by warriors who lived and died by their code. The samurai, ninja, and war monks may no longer walk the earth, but their legacy lives on, woven into the very fabric of Japanese society and beyond. The samurai, with their unyielding commitment to honor and duty, have left an indelible mark on Japan. Their influence extends far beyond the battlefield, shaping the ethics, values, and even the aesthetics of the nation. The principles of Bushido, courage, loyalty, and self-discipline, continue to resonate, not just in the martial arts, but in the way people approach their lives. Even in modern Japan, where technology and innovation dominate, there is still a deep respect for these ancient ideals. The samurai spirit can be seen in the dedication to one's craft, the pursuit of excellence, and the quiet strength that underpins the culture. The ninja, though often shrouded in myth and mystery, have also left their mark. Their stories of stealth, cunning, and resilience have captured the imagination of generations, both in Japan and around the world. While the true history of the ninja is often obscured by legend, their influence is undeniable. The tactics and strategies they perfected in the shadows have been studied and adapted, not just in military contexts, but in the business world, where the art of outmaneuvering the competition is still valued. The ninja's legacy is one of adaptability and survival, a testament to the power of the mind as much as the body. The war monks, the Sōhei, represent a unique blend of spirituality and martial prowess. Their legacy is one of balance, between the physical and the spiritual, between peace and conflict. In a world that often seems to value one over the other, the Sōhei remind us that strength and faith can coexist, that the body and the soul are not separate but intertwined. Their influence can be seen in the continued importance of Buddhism in Japan, where the teachings of compassion and discipline still guide many. The Sōhei's legacy is a reminder that true strength comes not just from the ability to fight, but from the wisdom to know when to lay down one's arms. As the world has changed, so too has the way these warriors are remembered. In the dojos of Japan, martial arts like kendo, judo, and aikido carry forward the techniques and philosophies of the samurai. The precision of a sword strike, the grace of a throw, the calm focus of a martial artist in training, all are echoes of the past, brought into the present. The ninja's influence can be seen in ninjutsu, a martial art that emphasizes stealth, strategy, and flexibility. Even the Sōhei's legacy lives on in practices that combine physical discipline with spiritual growth, reminding us that the way of the warrior is not just about combat but about cultivating the whole self. Beyond Japan, the legacy of these warriors has spread across the globe, leaving an unmistakable imprint on popular culture. Samurai films, with their tales of honor and sacrifice, have inspired filmmakers worldwide, from the classic works of Akira Kurosawa to modern action epics. The image of the lone samurai, wandering the countryside with sword in hand, has become a symbol of the eternal struggle between duty and desire, between the individual and society. The ninja, too, have captured the global imagination, their black-clad figures leaping from rooftops in countless movies, comics, and video games. The mystique of the ninja has been both a blessing and a curse, often reducing these complex figures to mere caricatures. Yet, beneath the Hollywood sheen, there remains a fascination with the true art of ninjutsu, with its emphasis on intelligence, cunning, and the ability to strike without being seen. The ninja's legacy is one of enduring intrigue, a reminder that there is power in the unseen and that sometimes the greatest strength is not in brute force but in strategy and subtlety. The war monks, though less well known in the West, have also left their mark. Their story is one of a warrior's journey not just on the battlefield but in the inner realms of the spirit. Their legacy can be found in works that explore the intersection of faith and conflict, and stories where the hero's greatest battle is not against an external enemy but against the demons within. The Sōhei's influence is a reminder that the path of the warrior is as much about inner mastery as it is about external victory. In contemporary media and literature, these warriors continue to inspire. They are not just relics of a distant past, but living symbols of the values and struggles that define the human experience. The samurai, with their stoic resolve, speak to the timeless conflict between duty and desire. The ninja, with their elusive ways, remind us of the power of the unseen, of the strength that comes from within. The war monks, with their blend of faith and force, challenge us to find balance in a world that often seems divided. Their stories are retold again and again, in novels, films, and art, each time adding a new layer to their legacy. The world may have moved on from the days of feudal Japan, but the spirit of its warriors lives on, in the hearts of those who continue to be inspired by their courage, their wisdom, and their unwavering commitment to their way of life. The legacy of Japan's warrior culture is not just a part of history, it is a living tradition, a source of strength and inspiration for generations to come. In a world that is constantly changing, the samurai, ninja, and war monks remind us that some things are timeless: honor, resilience, and the pursuit of a higher purpose. Their influence will continue to be felt, not just in Japan but across the world, as long as there are those who seek to live by the values they embodied.